Apology for La Condesa, Part 7. During the summer of 2018, the men's house fell apart with disinterest and hostility, and I had to pay for it up until September, along with help from JD. The whole project of a men's house wouldn't have been possible without JD, but he was planning to get married in the fall, and there was nothing we could do to continue on. The two men that were staying at the house without paying had gotten hostile towards me. And by the end of our 1 year lease, I couldn't even go to the house. Standing on the path leading up to the house, I hoped would snowball into a greater ministry for young men in need. I accepted it was over as I cried in JD's arms. As with the house, I helped start at age 18 for young men aging out of foster care. I started this house at age 19, and I prayed every day for God to provide. I told stories, I shared pictures, and explained to everyone at church the need and the hunger for Jesus followers to invest in the families in the Lexington neighborhood. I begged for help and received nothing but apathy and disinterest, and people telling me that I'm spoiled and entitled for asking for help to serve our neighbors in need. In hindsight, it seems we served as pioneers to break ground in the neighborhood. And years later, the church would invest more time and even have a bus drive into the neighborhood to pick a load of youth up for church events and after school programs. And JD eventually became the paid youth pastor. JD was a friend I had met when I was 17, but I had seen him before. He had a strange aura that he was like a caring, compassionate, and understanding saint. And he was. But he will be the first to say that it was also his ego. Behind the scenes, he had multiple crises of faith and mental health. We worked together in ministry for years, and he had a significant influence on me in how I organized groups and did outreaches and cared for people. But he had a personality that seemed almost immune to conflict. Whereas even if I did the same thing, I'd have people angry at me. A nickname I gave him at the time was Tact Man because he was always emphasizing how we had to be tactful, which was one of his skills. JD felt called to be a missionary, and he lived his life every day on mission, showing generosity, sharing about Jesus, and having an open ear to listen to people. Whereas so many people made excuses and ran away in fear, JD stepped up to take risks, to live radically, and set an example to inspire others. LD was another friend I met as a teenager, and she lived her life on mission and frequently stepped up to love people, show hospitality, and to be present for people in difficult situations. She was understanding, reliable, and took joy in giving above and beyond. JD and LD were in a relationship, and they had their ups and downs and periods of separation. For a while, they would have hours long discussions in the church parking lot, and I was there to be accountability or something as I walked laps around the church perimeter. When they got married, I was their best man, but like it was weird because I shared that position with PS. And they left before the wedding reception was even over. They ran out the back door, and my brother and I drove them to JFK Airport to catch a flight to Paris. Even as other people ignored, dismissed, and rejected me, JD and LD were reliable friends that would always make space for myself and for those we were trying to help. And they had some beautiful kids and continued serving at MSA Church to this day. And in those days, JD and I were working together consistently to run different ministries at the church, including the young adult group and a coffee house event, which ran every Friday night. JD took up the lead, and I was promoting both as best as I could, doing what I'm skilled at, making connections and sending out thousands of invites. As a teenager, JD and others had picked me up weekly for youth and young adult groups. And as I had a car, I did the same. At BOTR, I picked carfuls of people up, and at MSA, I would make plans to pick people up all along the way, and even going out of my way to further towns to make sure everyone was included. We were taught that if we wanted to get people to Jesus, we needed to tear down whatever barrier was in the way. If that was transportation, we would do whatever we could to get them a ride. And I was known as the guy for rides for Mary Lou or Tim or the Coleman family or Kim or Pat. For years, I had asked others to help provide rides to people in need, but I was met with apathy and I could never find donations to reimburse our rides ministry. It was only later that MSA had vans and buses go out. Our weekly coffee house event went on for over a year and was a ton of work between the planning, the food, the setup, the rides, etc. But a lot of people came in and found a welcoming place to be, to meet people, to relax. We set up talent acts, and sometimes when we lacked performers, I would take out my pimp costume, which I received from another church as a donation, and a didgeridoo and perform some random absurdist skit, calling myself Dr. I'll say it like this, Dr. Schnauzenpants. JD and I often slept at the church on Friday or Saturday nights after cleaning up. That often included blasting worship music and praying in the sanctuary. We would sleep on the same couch with my head at his feet and his feet at my head. Often waking up in freezing temperatures at 3 a.m., we would wander around the church looking for a blanket and each end up wrapping ourselves in some dirty tablecloths. JD sometimes had what may be called night terrors, waking up in fear and feeling the presence of a demon. He would rebuke the presence in Jesus' name and eventually go back to sleep. Our young adult group fostered a lot of fun times and beautiful relationships, but it dissipated over time as people got jobs and people moved away, deconverted, etc. Also, many of us had moved on to more leadership positions. One Saturday, a leader meeting was planned, but I had not been invited. As I was intending to leave, one woman on the leader team invited me in. As the meeting went on for hours, some point of personal conflict between the lead pastor, PB, and a pastor couple, D and J, was dragging on. So I raised my hand and gently suggested that they table the matter for the time being. PB gave me an intense stare and then agreed that we could move on. The meeting went on to discuss issues in the church and what leadership would go on to look like in the future. It lasted 14 hours in total, an entire Saturday, but at least they ordered us pizzas. Eventually, I was nominated to co-lead the Lost People ministry along with Randy, an older saint in his 60s, I think. that had dedicated his life to Jesus and to sharing the gospel message in love and gentleness. Randy and Phyllis were genuinely dedicated to humbly serving the Lord, and they were consistently caring toward me and wanted me to grow and succeed. Most of our time together involved planning community outreaches such as the trunk or treat or an antique car show. While we had a lot of participation from the church outreaches, basically no one wanted to go out and start gospel conversations in the community to tell people about Jesus and invite people to church. I would ask everyone to come along with me to the park or to local restaurants, but people were always too busy. On occasion, we would go to an event like Pirates Day, and a few people, like Todd, obviously, sincerely cared to host a fun game for kids and to share the gospel. I would go around to every tent and every organization and introduce myself and the church and tell them about Jesus if the opportunity arose. I was always big on making connections, serving as public relations, spreading the word, and trying to partner with whomever I could. When the church had opened, I went around to as many local businesses, restaurants, gas stations, and parks as I could, sharing about the church and inviting people to come and see what God was doing at MSA. One day I was in the local park and invited a middle school boy and girl. I was a teenager at the time, to our youth group. To my surprise, they both showed up, and the girl never came back, but the boy remained involved to this day, surrendering his life to Jesus and serving as a youth and worship leader. Another day, I was trying to pick up a struggling young adult, and a black man with an intense stare opened the door saying, "What you want?" I explained I was here to pick up AK. He was skeptical and explained that AK had gotten involved with the wrong crowd, and he was grateful that I was reaching out to him. He explained intensely, "My name is Ray. I teach the kids boxing." I invited Ray to church with the idea that maybe one day he could teach boxing. Over a year later, Ray walked into church with his girlfriend, who had been sentenced by a judge to community service at the church. They both chose to follow Jesus, and though his girlfriend died, Ray is still faithfully serving at the church to this day. And he even taught boxing lessons. When I visited MSA one final time, Ray embraced me with tearful eyes and thanked me, saying, "You got me into all of this. I found purpose, meaning, a reason to live here." I visited dozens of local churches and shared the story of how the church had closed and reopened. I asked for their help to partner together however they could, especially in gathering young adults into community and helping those who were struggling with homelessness, addiction, self-harm, etc. The pastors and leaders and nonprofits I met with in Ocean County usually treated me as some young, dumb, naive kid to think that we could work together in unity, like Jesus talked about. Many pastors ignored me. Many dismissed me. Some gave me lip service and never followed up. Some were openly hostile. Some were cowards. And some seemed to have a spark of hope, but they had been so worn down over time that they had clearly become quite calloused. One reformed pastor I met with asked more about me, and I explained some of my journey with apologetics and trying to balance reason and faith. I told him I struggled to have certainty in everything I believed. He handed me a book called The Sin of Certainty by biblical scholar P. Enns, which argued that the point of the biblical faith was not to believe without a doubt, that the Bible and Christian beliefs are 100% concretely and factually true, but to have trust in God that He's God despite our not knowing. In August of 2019, we had another big leader meeting at MSA, and it was hesitantly decided that I would become the leader of the Lost People and Discipleship Ministries. To explain, there were a number of different ministries based on core values of the church. Lost People aim to focus on outreaches and evangelism, equipping those who were found, born again Christians, to go out and save people who were destined for hell. Discipleship aimed to help those who had become born again Christians to grow in their relationship with God and in their service towards others. My friend and leader, AS, was obviously taking a risk on me because people thought of me as an unreliable wild card, despite the fact that I had been faithfully serving at the church for almost 5 years, and of course, that I was 21. AS was a young woman that had come from Denmark to serve with our local church in New Jersey, arriving at BOTR around the same time I did. She had the education and the position of a reverend, but in those days, women were often treated as second class to men in leadership, even when they often had the same level of training and experience, or even more. Sometimes people even walked out of church services offended that a woman was speaking on stage, which was incredibly childish of them. But they thought they were being faithful to God. AS served as the pastor of discipleship and, along with other women leaders, was rightly treated with the same respect that men would receive. What's more important than whatever her title or gender was that AS was an incredibly committed, determined, competent, compassionate, and genuine leader who was also an incredible blessing in my life and in the lives of many others. AS set one of the healthiest examples of what a pastor and leader in the church ought to look like. And AS married one of my friends and had a baby that shares my name. They're still faithfully serving today, AS and AB. Now it's AB and AB. And I got to hug AS goodbye before I left to serve as an international worker. My position ideally called for me to pastor a portion of the church and lead multiple ministries. One of which was ushering and security, which included making sure we had people around ready to greet, help people find seats, move chairs and tables, and pass the tithe and offering plate. Of course, the way we describe it would be something more like our mission is to foster a welcoming and safe environment where all people can come in and experience the power of the living God and the joy of life together with the people of God. Something like that. We always had mission statements. Like with any volunteer organization, it was a challenge to confirm reliable teams that would show up on time to the meeting and perform the responsibilities until the end of the service. But I'm grateful to those who were committed and who did the best they could. One example is a beautiful couple, Stosh and Roe, who had both had their lives changed by their decision to follow Jesus, as they committed to quietly, faithfully serving the Lord their entire lives. They were humble, loyal, and self-sacrificial servants who blessed everyone they encountered. They were patient, understanding, and sincere, and they actively served as ushers, as security, and Stosh had even begun driving the van and the bus, giving of his time to pick up local kids for youth group. Before I left New Jersey, I spoke briefly with them at church, thanking them for their continual service, blessing them, and bidding them farewell. I was also ideally organizing outreaches, evangelism, missions, demographics, and a Monday night group aimed at being a small group Bible study. We were told that every night there would be a group meeting at the church. And so each different ministry had a different night of responsibility. Some, like the Christ-centered families group, was running kids and youth ministries, which naturally attracted more people than discipleship or evangelism. Evangelism was always something relegated to a passionate few and avoided at all costs by the rest. They're evangelists in name only. As the leader, I was expected to echo whatever the pastor had preached on the previous Sunday. So I was forced to open up to Ezekiel 44 or something, and often PB would preach on basically the same thing for a month straight. I tried to engage the few people that showed up with meaningful conversation, and we tried to plan things to do together. We went out one time to Walmart to talk to people and invite them to some church event, but nothing like that got very far. Regarding PB, there are many moments that I can share about PB, and he was a strong, influential, and determined leader, to say the least. But he rarely seemed really present, and he was either incapable or unwilling to invest much time with me. He greatly influenced my life, but ultimately, he didn't care about my life. I was disposable. I was problematic. I was a naive, know-it-all kid. PB taught us regarding our life priorities. It's Jesus first, others second, and you're not even on the list. Think about that. Give and don't expect anything. God will take care of you. And there were many times when I had serious concerns about the way we were doing ministry, but I was always told to ignore my own thoughts and listen only to what the Bible said about a topic. As PB said, some of you are trying to seek guidance or give advice based on a book you read, a scientific study you learned about, or something you heard from a friend. But in ministry, our job is to give people the Bible and only the Bible. It's the Word of God who knows everything. I want to share about one of the most memorable sermons, which was when he preached on prayer. He shared his life experiences with prayer and how he had believed so strongly that God would answer prayers to provide financially, to heal the sick, or even to raise the dead. But he explained that never at any point had he seen an answer to prayer. He shared some Bible verses and personal thoughts and concluded that prayer doesn't change anything. Prayer changes you. And that was an incredible statement for our tribe, which believed that prayer really altered future events. And that if we got enough people to pray for some little girl with terminal cancer, that God would heal her, as if God is just counting the people. He's just waiting around until some particular number of prayers arrive at his throne. And then he's like, oh, now she's healed. I think that was the most sincere sermon that PB gave. That idea that prayer doesn't alter God's actions, but rather prayer transforms you and I into the people that will one day become the answer to our own prayers. PB was sincerely full of wisdom and experience and great principles, and he was a skilled leader in part because he majored on majors and minored on minors. That is to say, he was typically very authoritative on big things to make sure the organization was going in the right direction, but he wasn't usually a micromanager. If we wanted to partner with different groups or use the building for something or take our own initiatives, he wasn't trying to control everything. He often said, "My one rule is don't bore me." And Dan definitely doesn't bore me. PB often preached the most dogmatic and unreflective nonsense, often gaslighting us to tell us our experiences were not reality and that some diabolical spiritual force was whispering in our ears. PB successfully passed his ideas off as God's authoritative truth, but it was really just a buffet of his choosing, with varying degrees of any basis in reality or even in the biblical texts. And people listened to him because he spoke with a commanding presence. As I reflect on it, I recall that he peddled a lot of empty promises, and he rarely took responsibility for the harm that he caused in so many people's lives. In church, they love to place people on a pedestal when they have a good story, but everyone else gets quietly swept under the rug. That being said, I love PB, and PB's intention was sincerely for good. He was just, I guess, indoctrinated so deeply and thoroughly. He significantly impacted many people's lives positively, and he genuinely cared about investing in some people's lives to help them grow, mature, and achieve victory in their lives. Years later, PB helped me to raise money for my time in Colombia. But after that, there was no follow-up.